Inhabiting the world we have already conquered, the interoceptive turn, the science of expanded perception, and the closure of the destructive path. Author, E. Torregrossa. Classification, continuation of the ontological synthesis and interpretation of the passions of the soul, year 2026. Abstract. This essay constitutes the direct continuation and practical development of the Cartesian ontology of suggestion. It is grounded on the critical premise that humanity has already completed its phase of material expansion and territorial dominance over the planet. Therefore, persisting in the dynamics of blind production and compulsive consumption no longer generates development, but sheer pathology. Drawing from the alarming indicators of global psychological collapse reported in United Nations mental health documents, as well as the biophysical destabilization documented in the Geo7 environmental report, this article proposes replacing the imperative of conquest with the imperative of perception, using the sensory calibration of professional tasters as a methodological analogy. This paper analyzes the need to expand the human perceptive apparatus beyond the 5 classical senses of the Aristotelian tradition, exploring the richness of interoception, proprioception, and advanced chemical and thermal senses. Finally, the true dimension of the Cartesian cogito is restored through his last great work, The Passions of the Soul, 1649, demonstrating that the fundamental formula of sovereign existence translates into a rigorous, I perceive, I feel, therefore I am. 1. The limit of material expansion and the urgency to halt the destructive path. The central thesis that must govern contemporary thought in this year 2026 is that the Earth has already been entirely conquered. Human beings have colonized every ecological niche, mapped every single square foot of the Earth's crust, and subordinated global energy flows to the interests of the industrial machinery. However, the blind persistence of this expansive inertia, which mistakes habitability for uninterrupted exploitation, is rapidly driving the species toward an irreversible double fracture. As documented by the latest UN reports on mental health, we are heading directly toward global psychological chaos, a state of alienation, anxiety, and saturation of the human brain's adaptive mechanisms, triggered by the demand for infinite performance. Parallelly, the physical chaos of the planet is rigorously indexed by the United Nations through the Geo7 Global Environmental Outlook Report. This document confirms that insisting on producing and destroying within a territory that has already been completely subdued does not add well-being, but rather dismantles the subtle homeostatic balances of the biosphere. There is no use in continuing to conquer new markets, processing raw materials, or accelerating the transit of commodities, if the direct cost is the annihilation of our own perceptive and biological foundation. Collective survival demands a radical shift of vector, halting the outward advancement of the machinery and beginning, urgently and rigorously, to inhabit and decode the world already at our disposal. 2. The science of expanded perception, the taster analogy, and the hidden senses. To transition from production to inhabitation, human beings must re-educate their neurobiological apparatus and focus on increasing their capacity to perceive. In today's hyper-consumerist society, the average individual operates under profound sensory anesthesia. They consume vast amounts of coarse and massive stimuli because their receptors are saturated and dulled. To break this dynamic, it is necessary to adopt the precise methodology of specialized sensory tasting. An expert chocolate taster, for instance, is capable of discriminating multiple nuances within a single particle of matter, acidic, floral, woody, or astringent notes that go completely unnoticed by a layperson. The taster does not need to devour pounds of product to extract its maximum pleasurable yield. A minimal fraction, calibrated by a hyperfine attentional focus, is sufficient. Wealth does not reside in the quantity of matter destroyed, but in the sharpness of the perceptive analysis. The Church of Suggestion proposes transferring this rigorous attentional calibration to the totality of daily human experience. To achieve this, contemporary science forces us to tear down the old dogma of the 5 classical senses inherited from Greek antiquity. Today we know that the human nervous system possesses a far more complex and subtle sensory map, designed specifically to savor our internal conquest. We possess interoception, the sophisticated network of receptors that transmit to the brain the homeostatic state of the viscera, heart rate, blood pH, and the degree of biological safety within the tissues. We possess proprioception, which allows us to register gravity, muscular positioning, and the pleasure of physical balance without the mediation of sight. Lastly, we possess advanced thermal and chemical receptors capable of transforming contact with air, water, or a single grain of cereal into a high-definition perceptive experience. The true development of humanity is no longer technological, but neurosensorial, halting external aggression to begin discovering the hidden senses that allow us to extract ecstasy from the present with zero ecological impact. 3. The definitive Descartes, the passions of the soul, and feeling as the core of the cogito. This perceptive turn finds its ultimate scientific legitimization in the final evolution of René Descartes' thought. There is a flawless line of continuity that begins with the doubt of the discourse on the method, expands conceptually in the meditations on first philosophy and the principles of philosophy by integrating all cognitive processes, and reaches its definitive biological realization in his last great work, The Passions of the Soul, 1649. This treatise, tragically cut short by the philosopher's premature death just a few months after its publication, represents the laboratory where Descartes indissolubly seals the real union between mind and body. In The Passions of the Soul, Descartes abandons any vestige of pure abstraction to concentrate on the neurophysiological mechanisms of perception. He explains in meticulous detail how the movements of the animal spirits, what modern neuroscience identifies as the flows of neurotransmitters and action potentials, directly impact the pineal gland, generating affective and perceptive states that constitute the actual fabric of our conscious experience. For the definitive Descartes, the famous dictum of the cogito sheds its intellectualist rigidity and reveals its true somatic dimension. To think is, fundamentally, to feel. The conclusive Cartesian formula translates into an inescapable biological axiom: I perceive, I feel, therefore I am. Descartes understood, before his voice was silenced by death in the cold lands of Stockholm, that the human being is not a ghost in a geometric machine, but a living organism whose reason is made of flesh, perceptions, and passions. In this final work, pain and pleasure are analyzed not as mere psychological accidents, but as the primordial assessments the soul makes regarding the state of preservation of the body. Consequently, the purpose of Cartesian philosophy was never the ruthless industrialization of the planet, but the fine-tuning of the mind-body union to guarantee health, quality leisure, and the orderly delight of present existence. 4. Conclusion: sovereignly inhabiting the conquest. The verdict of this synthesis is absolute. The era of material aggression against the planet has ended. To keep producing for the sake of production, to keep destroying the ecosystem to feed an empty economic wheel, is the greatest pathology of our time, and the direct cause of the massive psychological breakdown reported by the United Nations. The Church of Suggestion establishes that the only path to salvation consists in definitively closing the destructive path of outward expansion, to inaugurate the inner journey of expanded perception. To inhabit the world we have already conquered means learning to be expert tasters of our own daily existence. It means applying hyperfine attention to the body's interoceptive channels to discover that all pleasure, all beauty, and all communication with the divine principle latent in nature are already encoded within our biological design. By halting the machinery and centering awareness on the pure act of feeling and perceiving, we restore the human being's sovereignty over their time and their organism. We do not need to conquer more worlds or devastate more ecosystems. We only need to learn to stop, to breathe, to activate the infinite range of our hidden senses, and to enjoy with dignity and fullness the tranquil ecstasy of the world we have already conquered.